did you receive a notification?
Yes, I did.
Excellent. Right. So formally, good morning, everyone. We're very happy for you to be here today, and we're very excited about this event. Again, we are joined by the authors, which is fantastic. And today in the audience, well, joined with us today is Dr. Elif from Turkey, and then Dr. Robert Lowe, also from Japan. Thankfully, I found out it's not completely nighttime, so it's a good time for both of the authors to be here today. And I can give you a very long introduction about both of them, but I think it'll be much nicer for them to briefly introduce themselves to us. So I think, Elif, I'll give the floor to you to quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll go straight on to Robert.
My name is Elif Kemaloglu-Er. It's great to be here, to be with you. Thank you so much. I'm an assistant professor at Adana Alparslan Turkish Science and Technology University. I worked as an English instructor for over 20 years at different Turkish universities. And I have been teaching in Adana for over 6 years now. And my research interests are English language teaching, global Englishes, and ELF in general.
Excellent. Thank you, Elif. And then I'm also going to give the floor to Robert.
Hi, everyone. My name's Robert Lowe. I've been teaching here in Japan for 15 years, too long. And I'm an associate professor at Ochanomizu University. And my research mainly focuses on things like native speakerism. I'm also interested in qualitative research, and I've written a little about English as a lingua franca, but I'm not the expert on that topic here, of course. Yeah, nice to meet everyone.
Perfect, thank you. So everyone knows that we'll be discussing their recently published article today, and I'm just going to look at another screen while I read the full title, so just bear with me. The topic, or the text today, is called Language Teacher Identity, World Englishes and ELF. Thank you, Elif. A Duoethnography between a native speaker teacher and a non-native speaker teacher. Now, Elif has prepared a brief introduction to this text, and she'll just tell us a bit more about it, the reasons behind the text, etc. And then after that, we'll open the floor and everyone can participate as usual, ask questions, make comments, and just engage with the two authors. So I'm going to mute myself now, and then Elif and Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy, and we are really excited with Robert about being here. And thank you so much for inviting us. And also, it's a great honor and pleasure to be read by different people. And we are really eager to get your comments and questions. So the title of our article is Language Teacher Identity, World Englishes and ELF, a Duoethnography between a native speaker teacher and a non-native speaker teacher. It was published in Journal of Language Identity and Education, and it has been recently given a volume and issue number. And you can access the article free if you write to us. The first 50 copies are free. And first of all, we would like to thank ELINET for this reading group event. And this event, by the way, and all reading group events will be on YouTube, and we would also thank you very much for this. You can watch them afterwards if you would like. So what is ELINET? ELINET is a global network that provides an online platform to develop a community practice of researchers, practitioners, postmakers, curriculum developers, materials writers, and students to collaborate and share knowledge, particularly in the fields of EMI and global Englishes. And if you can visit the site and become a member, if you like. ELINET is led by Dr. Nicola Galloway from the University of Glasgow. We would like to express our heartfelt thanks to her for all her valuable efforts to establish and coordinating this illuminating and mind-broadening platform. And I'm also very pleased to be a part of ELINET as the Global Englishes Research Lead Coordinator. And we would also like to thank Nadia Lamprut and Paolo and her team for all their support in this event. My name is Elif Kemaloglu-Er. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Translation and Interpreting at Adana Alparslan Turkish Science and Technology University. My research interests include English language teaching and teacher education, ELF and global Englishes. I worked as an English instructor at different Turkish universities for over 20 years, and I have been living in Turkey all my life. My native language is Turkish. I'm a non-native speaker of English and a non-native speaker teacher of English. I have been interested in the subject of ELF, World Englishes, and Global Englishes since I started my PhD at Boğaziçi University in English language education. And I reflected on more and more about my non-native speaker teacher identity after I got to know ELF. Native and non-native teachers has always been an interesting topic for me since I have always felt my non-native identity in the field, particularly near native speakers. And my co-author is Robert J. Lowe. He's a very successful and productive researcher in the field of ELT, ELF, and global Englishes with impressive works. Maybe he can introduce himself already. Robert, would you like to say anything else after you have said?
Sure. Well, I mean, of course, you made these slides, Elif, so thank you for the very kind description of my work. So most of my work has been on things to do with, as I said, native speakerism. But I think maybe something to mention, which is written in the second bullet point here, is duoethnography. So I think I was one of the first people in the field of ELT to experiment with duoethnography. And that's kind of, which I think Elif is going to talk about, that's kind of one of the points that brought us together in this project.
Yeah. He's a very successful and productive researcher. He's always humble, as you see, and in the field of ELT, ELF, and GE with impressive works. And after exploring his works on the issue, I really admired what he had been doing, particularly in the field of ELF and duoethnography. I wrote him an email and introduced myself and asked him if we could collaboratively conduct a duoethnographic study and write an article about our native and non-native speaker teacher identities. What did I think? I thought this would give inspiration and power to all native and non-native teachers who would read the article. I hope it has given you inspiration and power as well. He was very kind and said yes, and we started our long journey with a great deal of correspondence and intensive in-depth analysis. And you can visit his site as well. So why did we conduct this study? I asked myself this question before the presentation, and I wrote all these in the form of automatic writing. Each of us is unique with their own social linguistic and social cultural backgrounds. We have different families, we have been to different schools, and we have been raised in different contexts in different countries. We all have got our own strengths, our own weaknesses, or things to improve, and our own ways to settle the issues and survive. We have got our own identities, our own experiences, our own stories. And I also write stories, by the way. I'm a story writer, and I love the stories of people. And each of these stories is unique, but also as native and non-native speakers, we may also share some similar concerns in our own unique stories and stances. For example, as non-native speakers, we often share the same concern, expressing ourselves clearly and understandably in public or in mutual interactions, and being accepted as ourselves at the same time, okay? So we want to express ourselves, and also we want to be accepted, acknowledged in the way we are. In this article, we wanted to share our own stories and wanted to show that each teacher has their own unique story. Through our stances, we also wanted to present the concerns we might have and share in being a native and non-native speaker teacher. We have also seen that being involved with ELF, World Englishes, and Global Englishes, gave us opportunities to get to know ourselves and question and discover the realities of being a native speaker and a non-native speaker. And we realized that we became more humanitarian and egalitarian in our own stances through the encounters we had with World Englishes, ELF, and Global Englishes. And you may see that I had difficult times in learning and practicing this language, English, in my countries and contexts' own conditions. And despite these conditions, I have tried hard and done my best and used every opportunity to improve my English and to practice it, even if the conditions to practice it were limited in my EFL country. Why did I write all these? I wrote all these because I want to ask, under these conditions, how can you expect me to be like a being I have never been? I mean, a native speaker. This is my reality and my power as well. You cannot expect non-native speakers to be like native speakers. This can be a choice, okay, but it is not a necessity. They have their own backgrounds and cultures. They are themselves. So, if I were to list the strengths of this article, these would be openness, sincerity, naturality, and focus on our power as native and non-native speaker teachers, and focus on our abilities to improve as native and non-native speaker teachers. I want, indeed we want, with Rob, everyone to see this uniqueness and power, and we should evaluate all speakers within their own lives and conditions and acknowledge their own reality. People, native speakers, non-native speakers, all interlocutors cannot be all the same. They have their own English histories and their own English use. Everyone should be accepted as they are. Thank you for listening to my short introductory presentation. For any questions, comments, and further correspondence, you can write to our addresses, okay, Kemaloglu-Er at atu.edu.tr and the other address. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Elif. That was really, really fascinating. And I've actually just read what Nicholas said earlier about the fact that, first of all, it was a very nice presentation, but it's really nice to hear your personal take on this experience and your interest in the field. It's lovely to hear from the author themselves. So I don't know, Robert, do you have a similar approach or reason for being involved in this, or is there something you'd like to tell us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that Elif covered all the main points. I think that I agree that, you know, looking at the contrast between the two of us and our backgrounds, well, this is one of the strengths of duoethnography as a method. By looking at the contrast, by comparing two lives, you learn something new about the phenomenon that you're studying, but also about yourselves, right? And I think that through this project, we both learned something about ourselves, you know, points that are both, you know, very empowering, and also, you know, especially in my case, I think I came to some kind of realizations about, you know, some of the ways that I maybe don't live up to my self-image. So I think that, you know, this, as Elif said, it was a very kind of powerful experience working on this article. And I think that, you know, it had these very strong effects for us. And I hope that through reading it, other people in a kind of indirect dialogue with us will maybe come to some realizations about themselves as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm actually going to open the floor to anyone who would like to contribute maybe a question or a comment. Just for logistic purposes, I would ask that maybe just raise your hand so that everyone don't unmute themselves at the same time. But yes, so anyone who wants to say something, go right ahead.
Thank you for the comments. Thank you so much. Yeah, Nicola has written, this also makes me think of Heath and Mona's article, A Tale of Two Teachers. Yes, yes, also I love this article.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for your nice words as well.
I had a couple of questions. And well, first of all, thank you both for joining us today. We're delighted that both of you could make it. And this is why we set up the network, so that to bring us together to chat. You know, we're writing on similar areas, but we don't really get a chance to get together and chat. And I really like the personal insight into your interest in the field and also your background. And I don't think that we see enough of this type of research in our field. And I wondered, Robert, you touched on this when you talked about ELT and duoethnography, and I wondered if you had any suggestions on the usefulness of this approach to direct research in our area, perhaps with regards to curriculum innovation.
With regards to curriculum innovation specifically, that's I'm not quite sure about that. I guess that you know, the duoethnography itself is related to the idea of career. I think that's how you pronounce it, like the idea of life history as curriculum. That, you know, people's life forms the curriculum that they learn from. I guess it's similar to Lorty's idea of apprenticeship through observation. So I guess when we are approaching our teaching, we're also drawing on our life experiences. And so, you know, if you engage in this kind of introspective dialogue about your life history, you may come to kind of understand what brought you to the views that you currently hold, and maybe reevaluate those, which will then have an effect on your life and teaching, I guess. I'm not sure if that's a good answer, but that's what occurred to me.
No, it does, and it was making me think it also relates to researcher positionality as well, and we encourage our students to think about their own stance. But I think Paolo's probably got a question because he's nodding his head.
No. It's I was nodding with what you said, because this is actually something that I'm interested in and I don't see enough of in the research. More than a question I had, I wanted to comment on it because I found both perspectives very interesting and quite different from my own experience. Actually, if I had to narrate my own, it would be quite different from both of you. But the story that really had an impact on me while reading the article was Robert's, because one thing that I got the impression of while reading the literature on native speakerism is that despite the use of these terms native and non-native in brackets or in scare quotes, as the article calls them, I still think that the line is still very strong, even among, not only among, you know, in everyday life, but even in academia, I still perceive there is sometimes what I perceive as certain misblame towards native speakers as well, because you mentioned your upbringing, you mentioned the cultural environment that shaped you, and you mentioned, it influenced me, it affected me in the sense that I was quite chauvinistic. And I was like, yeah, this is something that is debated. It's also mentioned by Holiday, by Philipson. But I was thinking, yes, well, that is very noticeable in the case of English. But I don't think that is an exceptional feature of English native speakers. I think that's really a feature of native speakers of every language ever towards their own language. And I was thinking, this is not really mentioned in the literature, but I was thinking maybe this is part of the reason why ELF is difficult for people to accept. Because, well, if you're saying English doesn't belong to native speakers, then you're also implying that my language doesn't belong to me. I'm the native speaker of that language to a certain extent. But perhaps this is just my opinion in reading everything about the literature. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the idea of ownership of language is really difficult, right? I mean, I think that, you know, there are lots of, you know, I'm doing some research at the moment, and my students keep using the word tool. English is a tool for them. So they kind of reject this idea that English can be owned. And I think Widowson in like 1994 was writing that, you know, English is no longer owned by its native speakers, and you know, it's now been spread around the world. I guess maybe what separates English from a lot of other languages is that, you know, English speakers did go and spread the language around the world. So it's much more difficult to sort of claim ownership because it's spoken by such a plurality of people. But yeah, I think
Exactly.
Of course, language is very central to identity. So I don't, you know, I wouldn't want to go around telling people that, you know, this, you know, your language doesn't belong to you. I can only talk about, you know, my experience of you know, or my connection to English, and maybe the status of English in the world. And on the idea of, you know, like the idea of blame, I think you said, putting blame onto native speakers for native speakerism. I think that, like, I don't accept any blame as a, you know, I think native speakerism is a terrible thing. I don't expect any blame. I don't accept, sorry, any blame for that as a, you know, as a native speaker myself. But I do understand that, you know, I benefit from all the privileges that come from that ideology. So I think it's not my fault that native speakerism exists, but it is partly, you know, something that I have a responsibility to try and alleviate, because I do benefit from the privilege.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
I have seen some questions in the chat that I'm following, so I just want to quickly make sure that I don't miss any. So Nicola was reflecting on what you were saying, Paolo, by saying, can we really compare English to other languages? And also, I see just now, do you think that we have a resurgence of native speakerism with this global spread of EMI? Elif and Robert, what do you think?
Elif, what do you think?
I think EMI and global Englishes go hand in hand now. So I don't feel there's such a danger or such a resurgence, but I don't know. I mean, people haven't become aware enough. So we are, for example, global English is aware. So from our point of view, it's not a threat, but maybe why we should make in-depth investigations on this. I don't know. But from my point of view, I don't see such a threat.
I was wondering, so Nicola, you said you were asking about the resurgence of native speaker and with the global spread of EMI. Why do you think there's a connection there?
My concern is that in the field of TESOL, we've had so much hard work and efforts with the TESOL organisations, non-nest movement, British Association of Applied Linguistics mailing list banned the use of native speakers, so job adverts calling for native speakers. Obviously, the emergence of research paradigms like ELF, World Englishes, Global Englishes. And then along comes EMI, and we see a lot of new job adverts now for native English speaking teachers with a science background. Or so do we have very well established non-native speaking scholars across the university, perhaps at risk of being replaced by, and there's so much criticism on their English competency, and it's obviously how we define competency and proficiency. And I see all the work now in EMI teacher training is really critical of non-native speaker teachers' English proficiency, and I have concerns about this. I just wondered in the Japanese context what your thoughts were on this.
Japan's I don't know, kind of an outlier in several ways, I think. So it's first of all, there's a lot of native speakerism in Japan. You know, last year I started my job at this university, and the first question I was asked in the interview was, "You've written this book where you compare, you know, like native speakerism to kind of racism and stuff like that. But you know, this job was advertised as being for native speakers, so how would you respond? That was the first question in the interview. Yeah, so that kind of thing does happen a lot still. I didn't actually realize that when I applied for the job, I should say, but that kind of thing does happen. You see it in a lot of job advertisements, although there is a movement against it. But there is also kind of a very big focus on, you know, English as a lingua franca and so on in the Japanese context. There's a lot of work done on that with Keiko Murata at Waseda University and the Center for English as a Lingua Franca at Tamagawa University. So I think there's a kind of strange sort of duality in the way that you know, Japan focuses on these topics. In terms of EMI, I've never really worked in an EMI program, but from what I understand in the EMI programs in Japan, the main problem that they seem to be finding in terms of recruitment is having enough people who are actually qualified to teach English and to teach a subject. Because there's a lot of people who have like a bachelor's degree in something and a master's degree in TESOL, or a master's degree in something and no qualifications in TESOL. And so I think it's quite difficult to find people who are, you know, capable of teaching. But whether that has any, you know, kind of impact in terms of native speakerism, I'm not sure, not working in the programs myself.
Mm-hmm. And also that depends on the conditions as well, as you have said. Being an expert in something and being able to give these courses and being a native speaker. So should all these be taught as criteria in the recruitments? Not in Turkey, I would say. I mean, being an expert would be the first criterion, and being proficient in English would be the second criterion. But there wouldn't be such a native speakerism, I guess. Also, native speakers now leave Turkey a lot, so we don't have this issue because of our external conditions.
Mm.
I think Yao has her hand up.
Oh yeah. Hello everyone. I'm the new student coordinator for this group. It's such an honor for me to, you know, listen and hear everybody talking and so academically. But for a new student here, so I'm just quite curious about this paper, because when I'm reading this, I was actually had the connection of what I experienced in the past. I actually learned English pretty late, also about the age of 12. By that time, I didn't have a lot of English environment, and so in lack of like the English conversational learning opportunities, the only resource that I had was from the course books. So other than that, I literally had nothing or no one to talk to. So as a non-native speaker, I kind of feel like sometimes if I'm speaking to the native speaker, I will be anxious. I will feel like, oh, what if I couldn't get myself across? Or what if I couldn't understand the native speakers, you know, like the local dialect or the slang, anything related. So what I'm asking here is for some suggestions, or what kind of attitude should we have as a non-native speaker to learn the English, you know, this language? Yeah.
To learn English?
Yeah.
What kind of attitude should we have as non-native speakers to learn English, or in our interactions with the other people? You should confide in yourself and you should try to do your best.
Be confident.
As always. And
yeah,
this is, know that this is so common. I was very nervous before this presentation, even if I'm an experienced speaker of English. So this is so common. And why did we write this article? to show you that you're not alone in
Okay,
your
thank you.
situation.
Yeah.
Confide in yourself.
Uh-huh.
Do your best. Do your best. Practice
Yeah.
a lot. Do
Mhm.
whatever is required,
Mhm.
but also be yourself at the
Oh,
same
yeah.
time. And that's their problem. That's their
Okay.
Yeah,
That
that was
communication's a
what,
two-way street,
but
right?
yes, Rob may tell his own opinions as well.
I was just going to support what you said. Communication's a two-way street. It's not. It's the job of both parties in any interaction to make sure that the communication is successful. It's not the job of any one group particularly to do that. So it's not something anyone should be blaming themselves for or thinking it's their job to fix for whatever reason.
Okay. Thank
But
you.
don't forget to do your best. I mean, that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you should always use broken English or something. Do your best. I mean, do your best in expressing yourself in an understandable manner. That's the most important thing. But accuracy counts. Of course, accuracy matters, especially in academic corners. So people would judge you if you are not accurate enough. So you should pay attention to this as well. When we say L, for example, there seems to be too much tolerance. No, there should be a balance, I guess, because there is the reality outside, and people wouldn't be that tolerant, of course. But you should do your best. And if you do your best, life will flow in the way you want.
All right. Thank you. That's really brilliant. I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you.
I have actually also just been listening to this and thinking about what is being said, and I'm wondering from a non-native speaker point of view to the native English speakers here, out of curiosity, do you ever experience a form of I could say nerves when speaking to non-native speakers in English specifically?
You're asking this to a native speaker, I guess, right?
Yeah, so I presume Nicola, Robert, I can't see anyone else on here, maybe native speakers. How do you feel?
Well, my microphone's on, so I'll answer first. Yeah, I mean, I feel nervous very often. But maybe I guess it depends on the situation. For example, when I'm meeting, a new class of students, then I'm often very nervous because I don't know exactly, where I should pitch my English, and the kind of first impression with the class is always very, high stakes. You don't want to, upset them or put them off or, come across badly. So that's always a worry. And I think another thing is that, I worry about my ability to be a good listener. Because I think I'm not always a good listener, partially because I spent a lot of time playing punk music as a teenager and my hearing isn't very good. But partly because I think I'm just not always great at listening to people, and I think that's very important. And I don't want to give the impression that I'm not listening to someone because of their speakerhood or whatever. So I think I'm kind of nervous in that sense. I don't want to give a bad account of myself as a communicator, and I worry that I sometimes do. So yeah, that's maybe what I think about that.
That's fascinating. I see Michael has also unmuted. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, yes, I'm going to ask some questions. Sorry, I'm an associate tutor at Glasgow University with the TESOL department, my first year. Thank you to Dr. Elif and Robert, I found this really, really interesting, fascinating. I think because of my years of experience of teaching abroad, what I really found was that, for example, Dr. Elif, you said in your theme too, you talked about your awareness of WE and EFL coming into the classroom, encouraging speaking your own accents, pronunciation, only correcting it if it interferes with intelligibility, integrating cultures. to me, all that I mean, that's excellent. To me, that was the communicative approach that has been going on from a long, long time, and I was surprised and intrigued that this is now seen as WE. I would have thought it was there already. And how would you explain that, that when you know, before that you weren't sort of aware? Is that because Turkey are very traditional in their teacher training, perhaps?
No, now, but yeah, there used to be, of course, communicative language teaching as an approach, which really promoted communication and communication intelligibly. But now there is an identity issue which has been attached to it. And this is very important, I guess. There's now the philosophical side of it. I mean, communicative language teaching and to me, it didn't have a philosophical side. It just pushed students to speak, right? In their own ways, intelligibly, yeah. I agree with this. But what about the background of it? Backgrounds of students, their identities. Now, I think it is a more profound issue now, which should be taught in a multivariate way. Communicative language teaching, I think, formed some kind of a background for the current approach. But now there is more to that, I guess. That's my own opinion.
Oh, yes, definitely. But surely books nowadays are taking into account the country's cultures. For example, I was in Palestine and they designed a curriculum for the Palestinian English language teaching. And it was all about bringing in the Palestinian culture into teaching English. That was the other thing. So anyway, we'll go on. Question for Dr. Robert. I was intrigued too by your feeling negative about only having reached intermediate level of Japanese. I wondered if you'd ever seen that as a strength, because when I went to do my PhD, I then started to learn Spanish. I didn't get very far, I mean, intermediate level like you. But to me, it transformed my way of teaching and seeing my learners, because you go through the way you now really experience what it's like to learn a foreign language. So I was surprised that you did see that negatively rather than the positive.
Yeah, well, I think learning the language to intermediate level is definitely positive. And since we wrote that article, because we wrote it in like 2021, I think, my Japanese has continued to very gradually improve in sort of, I don't know, Sisyphean task. So learning it has been very positive because I've gone through the same process that my learners are going through. I think that, you don't have to become a successful speaker of a language in order to get the benefits of learning the language in terms of being able to empathize with your students. But I do think that my colleagues, the Japanese professors that I work with are all extremely proficient in English. And when I go into a meeting, I don't understand a lot of what's happening, and they often have to kind of help me and explain things, and that does make me feel like inadequate, I guess. And I think that as someone who is in my work stressing the importance of things like multilingualism and linguistic pluralism and all of these things, it feels like I don't embody that. It feels like I still kind of ride the wave of being a native speaker, even if I don't want to, because I don't have the proficiency to function on the level that I think I should be able to.
Thank you, Dr. Elif, and thank you, Robert. Dr. Robert.
Thank you so much for your illuminating questions, and also I think the publishing companies are just giving a lip service to this, really. I mean, they want to earn some money, and they say, oh, Elf is popular, and they include some accents. But that's a mindset that should be really embraced. Okay, so I guess, for example, also Nicola has written, yes, countries, of course, we always adapt the textbooks to us, to our own context. can't we? I mean, we must, because there is a native speaker speaking with a variety which is totally different from mine in the audios, right? So of course we adapt them to our own context, and we also add cultures and use them as a means to teach English, but also we add our own cultures to this. But textbooks are kind of superficial in this still. That's my own opinion.
Thank you both. I see that Lee also has a question. Lee, if you want to just unmute yourself and switch on your camera there. No, we can't hear you.
Actually, I got a question. As we all know that whatever we are native speaker or non-native speaker English, and we need to focus on expression, the right meaning. But actually, I'm the student of a coordinator, but actually before that, I have some working experience in my country, and that just as for me, what makes me very confused that what kind of a standard, a teaching standard we should to take it. So that makes me so confused. You know that in my country, lots of parents and lots of students, they pursue that. They will choose that maybe the perfect accent, which is close to the native speakers, and they think it is very important. So that made me so confused that when we teach English, which kind of standards we need to follow by, or we need to focus on. Yeah.
There must be a standard, of course, in order that people can understand each other, because intelligibility needs some form of standard, of course. How can we understand each other if I can't make some sentences with some rules, right? There must be some kind of a standard to a certain extent. So, for example, in our country, in our suggestions, we made the suggestion that up to an intermediate level, maybe we may give the rules, the specific vocabulary that would be of use, but then we can become more and more tolerant to variations after the intermediate level of English, maybe. I mean, that's just a suggestion, though. In the beginning, you may start, but students get confused because they want to receive the rules and what they want to know what the standard is like. So after the intermediate level, maybe at the upper intermediate level and at the advanced levels, students may be set freer in choosing their own variations and varieties. But this is about the grammatical rules and accuracy. I mean, the accents can be multivariate from the very beginning, I guess. You can include many varieties in the class if you want, in the beginning as well. But there should be one variety, I guess, more dominant than the other, so that the students would feel safer. What would Robert say? Let's listen to him.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the comments that people are writing. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse because I've been shouting at students all day from the front of a classroom. Yeah, I think that the question of standard is very interesting. Like the idea of a perfect, pronunciation or something. Which one is that? There are so many. The idea of a perfect native speaker pronunciation, but like people from different parts of different countries all speak different varieties. What about the people from, you know, different parts of the world who speak English as, you know, their first language? How do we decide which is the standard that we aim for? I guess the problem is I don't have an answer, because you know, my aim as a researcher is not really to create frameworks. It's more to sort of pick holes in things until they fall apart. So I'm probably not the right person to ask. But yeah, I have a lot of questions about what counts as a standard. But I think that, you know, the kinds of questions that I'm asking aren't very helpful maybe to teachers who have to prepare students for tests. And so, or, you know, prepare students for study abroad, or prepare students for, you know, whatever they need to be doing. So all of my kind of skepticism about standards and, you know, setting one particular variety as a standard, it comes up against the structure of the industry, and, you know, the markets and the jobs people have to compete for. And you know, it's very difficult to say, you know, we shouldn't be focusing on one standard. I think if, you know, when people are so constrained by the social structures that we currently live in. So I'm afraid I don't have a good answer. Sorry.
That's one of the most you know, complex issues in ELF Global English, is the pedagogy side of it and testing. But still, we are really, I mean, trying to establish a kind of framework for this in our own context, making suggestions. I mean, also setting up some sample curricula. So it's so hard, but the mindset is there. So you should really make use of it. The mindset says, be as tolerant as possible. I mean, acknowledge the varieties. I mean, accept the cultures, include them in the class. There's a non-native speaker reality out there. So if you have this intention, things will be good, I would say. But there's not a fixed way of doing this, I would say.
Thanks,
And
both.
can I just say, so Nicola's written, in today's increasingly globalized world, we can see how people are extending the rules of English. They're communicating successfully in a way that's different to this so-called standard presented in the classroom. I think that's true. I think maybe that's something that I don't see so much in my own context, in my teaching context, because there is, you know, the teachers and the students that I work with are often very strongly directed towards, you know, mastering a standard. And you know, if you kind of try to raise some of these points, the response that I often get from students is, okay, that's great, but I've got to pass this test. So teach me how to pass this test, please. That's what I kind of see. But I know, you know, I've read a lot of the studies in ELF that show how people are communicating outside of the classroom, and as you say, extending these rules. So I think maybe it's just a limitation of my teaching context. Yeah.
And can't they go hand in hand? For example, in my classes, after I got introduced to ELF Global Englishes, I tried to integrate those extended forms more. So of course, we are bound with the standardized English and course books. But also you can set up your own curriculum parallel to this, I guess, if you have the intention, right, Nicola? Can't we integrate those extended forms of English in our classes? For example, we can invite different speakers. These are my suggestions in my own publications. I always question this. How can we make ELF-aware pedagogy, GE-aware pedagogy possible in a realistic way in our classes? We can integrate whatever, I mean, opportunities we have into our classes as much as possible, because we're always limited with the standardized tests. That's also a reality. What do you think, Nicola?
I'm going to pass this over to Paolo, who has his hand up and I know is working on integrating this perspective into the classroom. And I'm sure he's got lots to say.
Thank you, Dr. Galloway. I don't know how helpful this is going to be, but again, I'm going to answer the question that Lim asked from the perspective of my own context, because I don't know how many people will find it useful, but I was a teacher in China. And what is it that I taught in China? Well, I was educated in ELF, and I actually had a strong, how to say, support. I felt very strongly supportive towards the paradigm already after leaving my MA. But when it came to teaching, the considerations I had to make, they had to be, first of all, pragmatic, in the sense that, so what is it that my students need? And, trying to answer that question, then what is it that I'm going to teach them? And thinking about my students, I knew that the majority of them would never leave the country. The majority of them would never actually interact in English with either native or non-native speakers, so to say. So I was thinking, well, what's the point of teaching them, say, Indian English? They are going to, I know in advance, they're going to reject it, and I know that they're not going to use it. But so what is it that they want? They want to pass the test. So what they want me to do is to teach them standard English. But perhaps even by teaching the standard English, which should have been general American, essentially, even though that's the main thing that I'm teaching, I can still find ways to get it closer to an ELF pedagogy in other ways. There are still things that they might need that I can give them through ELF. I can give them more confidence about trying to see if I can, if not, I don't think I can demolish, but perhaps I can mitigate this barrier between, oh, I'm a non-native speaker, I can't speak, I'm so anxious, etc., etc. Maybe I can do that. And one thing I struggled hard as a teacher was the cultural element of ELF. That's something I tried very, very hard to implement. But if I had to assess myself on how well I perform in that regard, I would give myself a 5 out of 10. I think I could have done much, much better. But back then, I didn't have anything. Everything I did, I had to come with it from my own head. I didn't have Kemaloglu-Er and Lowe's wonderful book. Had I had it, I would have done much better, I think, in my endeavor. But yeah, that was in my opinion, there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer for this question, like what is it that we use. It depends on where we are teaching, who our students are, what we can offer them, what their goals are. Because I know some people have tried to implement ELF from an ideological perspective. There have been narratives from Heath Rose, from Robbie Barlina's students. And when we try to force ELF, the result is a disaster, according to these reports. So when I was reading that, I felt like, okay, I did not fail as an ELF teacher. Sorry for monopolizing the conversation. I just thought it might be useful for somebody.
Forcing is not a good thing, by the way. We should really be rational, also balanced. I mean, we shouldn't be a fanatic of anything, I guess. But ELF and GA approaches, I mean, they all opened new paths for us, and we should be open to them, I would say. Thank you so much, Paolo.
Thank you very much, everyone. As you see, it is now 11 a.m. And while I think that we could continue with this conversation probably until much later evening hours there for Robert, I think it's good if we stop now. I am just going to ask Elif, if it's possible for you, would you mind just sharing your screen with your 2 email addresses? If anyone would like to reach out to either of the author with questions or follow-up comments, maybe. Ivona, I see that you've been very active in the chat and people have been responding to as well. thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And I am going to be stopping with the recording soon, but I would just like to quickly say that our next reading group session is only planned for December. And for this session, we will be discussing the book by our new lead coordinator for our Languages and Social Justice strand, Denise, and it's specifically about languages and social justice. So the advertisement email for this will be going out pretty soon. I'm also just going to ask Paulo to please just post that poster for us in the chat. It's really just to quickly remind you that the conference is in motion and the calls will be going out soon. And you will also have noticed that I've posted all the links to our social media. If you're active on any of those channels, please do follow us. You'll get some first-hand news from there. And then from my side as well, thank you very much both to Elif and Robert for joining us and making your time available. This was a fascinating read and an absolutely fascinating discussion.
Thank you so much. It was really a great pleasure for me and for Robert as well, I'm sure. And
Yes,
will you be sharing the chat part with us?
Oh, yes.
I'm trying to, but I'm having trouble with that as well, Nadia. I don't know why it doesn't let me.
That's okay. So the poster for the conference is already on social media and it will be going out pretty soon as well. So that's not a problem. And the chat for the conversation today, as soon as it's been converted, I will post this on ELINET. So it will be available as an attachment for everyone to read through and just look at the questions if they want it. So definitely it will be there, yes.
If you have, I and Robert, maybe, if we couldn't answer your questions in the chat, you can write to us. Thank you so much for your questions and comments. They were really mind-broadening. And it was so enjoyable to be with you today.
Right.
Thank you very much, Siva. Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank
I enjoyed
you so
it.
much.
I learned a lot. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.